And so I want to welcome everyone to the Alberta IoT monthly meeting. I'm just going to get back here, actually. Just a minute, guys. Little, as I try to get ourselves back to where we need to be. Sorry, guys. Lovely. There we go. We're on a roll. So we'll start now. So I'm Brenda Beckador. I'm the Executive Director for Alberta IoT. Alberta IoT is a nonprofit consisting of organizations with a vested interest in the success of the Internet of Things in the province of Alberta. Our mission is to position Alberta as the worldwide center of excellence for the Internet of Things technology. Now, later today, you will receive a thank you. And in there, you'll have the slide deck from all of our speakers today, but also a couple other extras that we are adding today. So the first one is TELUS Sparks. They are looking at how they can innovate their science center. And so there is a survey that we are asking you to fill out, and it's around, should Calgary Science Center be refreshed? And going forward, there will be some conversation around how IoT could actually come in and work alongside the Science Center and do some cool things. So there'll be some more information coming up in the near future. The other offering that we will be sending out today is from MMP. They have created a 2-hour complimentary innovation workshop with subject matter experts that is free to our members. And in it, they will create an agenda specifically for your company. So you can talk to them about strategic planning, tax strategy, cash flow, moving your business internationally, leveraging technology, cybersecurity. So there is an attachment that you can fill out and you can engage with MMP directly. It is a 2-hour free session and it's specifically for Alberta IoT members. Now today we have a number of things coming up, but the very first thing I want to do is invite Mike DeRoche. Mike, I'm hoping you're on the line, and if you could jump on and have a conversation with us about our upcoming golf tournament.
Sure, happy to. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm just buried in my basement here, so I'm sure the audio and the video is not the best, but yeah, we're really excited to put this together. Obviously, as Brenda mentioned, part of the return to work and business now that COVID restrictions are starting to lift and there's some light at the end of the tunnel. We feel that a golf tournament is a great opportunity for us to get back, not only re-engage with our membership and drive opportunities that way, but look at prospective members as well. So we've got some details here that Brenda's kind enough to share. September 18th is a Friday that we've booked. We're going to start registration at noon, tee off at 1 o'clock. And I think in terms of the way that we've structured this event, I think there's a lot of value for each golfer. So the entry fee is only $175. That includes cart, includes dinner. Right now we've planned a backup based on Alberta Health regulations and guidance. So if we can't hold the traditional banquet style dinner, we will have a box dinner with golf cart and potential drive-in movie theater after the event. So some unique things there. We've also considered commuting to and from the location. We have a shuttle service available. We've tried to make this as easy as possible for members to get engaged. This will be exclusive to our membership for the first 2 weeks. After that, we will go public with it. So it's a great opportunity to look at some of the sponsorships available, get your company out in front of our membership, talk about some of the initiatives and things that you're working on, and just a chance for all of us to reconnect and hopefully put an end to Zoom calls here at some point. So full details, we've got 2 emails created for this. There's, if you have inquiries on sponsorship, we have a specific email dedicated to that. In addition, just for registration, we've got everything listed on Birdies, which will be made available to everyone by PDF early next week. So again, we've got a 2-week opportunity here within membership to make this exclusive to us as before we branch out to the general public as well. So great opportunity to kick off again and get membership re-engaged and look at some fundraising for our association and look at the future build here. So thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to go back to where we're at. So again, that letter will come out next week to membership. You will have 2 weeks, and then after that, it'll go to the public. The next event coming up will be on July 3rd. That's our next monthly meeting. Tom from McThings will be talking about the benefit of edge computing. Obviously, the golf tournament, September 18th. We have our agriculture food event on September 29th. It is a virtual event. It is getting quite well established already. We've got our panelists and our facilitator for the event set up. We will be talking more about it as we move forward and giving you more details, but it is going to be an exciting event, and it's one of our big major events. The next, just trying to get, sorry guys, there we go. And finally, I just want to mention, we have sent out a note to anyone who is a member that we have a LinkedIn members only group. This is for your benefit, so you can turn around and post about events happening in your organization, have conversation, that type of thing. We've sent it out to our contact person that is registered with us, but it is open to your company. So if you want to add other people from your company into our LinkedIn members only group, that's great. Our website obviously always carries our upcoming events. We are organizing a couple of them right now and should have them live to you in the next 2 weeks. And obviously join us on Slack. And of course, we've always keeping you up to date on COVID. So without any further ado, I want to introduce our next speaker for the day, which is Eric Larson from Teletics. I'm always doing that to Eric. And he's going to talk about exporting 202, important lessons and why every Alberta company should do it. So Eric, would you like to take over? And you're muted, Eric.
Just need to try and do the screen share thing. Host disabled participants.
Okay, I'm going to get in there right now, Eric, and let you be a host. How's that? And then you'll have to make it, bring it back to me. There you go. You should be able to do it.
There we are.
Working?
How does that work?
Awesome.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Brenda. I guess just to sort of state, I'm not here to sell you guys anything. I guess we're all in the business of trying to share what business we're in so that we can try and present ourselves as kind of Team Alberta to the rest of the world. So this is a bit like a YouTube video. You're going to get the 5 minutes of commercial and hopefully the hour of good value out of it. So I'll quickly go through kind of who we are and where we came from. We started in 2003. We call ourselves a specialty wireless telecom products manufacturer. And the way I describe Teletics, you know, as the elevator pitch is we make communications products for nasty environments. So this is chemical plants, factory floors, and lumber mills, mining, drilling rigs, those kind of things. And where we started was we made, people may not know what POTS means. It's plain old telephone service. So back in the days when you had a phone booth at the corner of a gas station parking lot, we had a wireless technology that people could put in rather than trenching cable because they didn't want to put cable into their brand new tarmac underneath their gas station. And we still are sort of in some of those businesses. So we're based in Calgary. We do all our final assembly and manufacturing and quality assurance here, as well as our engineering and software development. And we've got salespeople kind of scattered all throughout the world, and we'll talk some more about that. So a picture is kind of worth 1,000 words. So a little over half of these are taken at Teletics sites. So the top left corner is a chemical plant that's in the Houston area. And what we're doing for them is providing emergency phone communications in the form of a big yellow phone that's down at ground level that they can very easily see. We have paging capability across the system. It's mesh radio, and the benefit to the customer of the meshing radio approach to this problem is twofold. The first is there's a significant cost savings to them to do meshing, and the reason is because in a large chemical plant environment, it's not too hard to find power in a lot of different places, but it is very, very difficult to run a communications cable from each one of those locations back to the main building. And when you're in that kind of an environment, it's not just running a cable, it's you know, corrosion resistant conduit. The electricians are generally certified for high level operation. There's scaffolding involved, all this kind of stuff. So at this particular site, just in wiring costs alone, we saved them over $100,000 US. And the benefit that they also get with the meshing radio is there's no one single point of failure. So if there's ever a situation where power is removed from certain parts of the chemical plants, the rest of the equipment that's still powered up will still communicate as if you know, it's business as normal. So some of the things I'll talk about in my international business development presentation is the scale of some of the stuff that we see. That particular chemical plant is over 100 square kilometers in size. These are massive, massive places. They're right against the ocean. There's corrosion problems. There's areas in the chemical plant where there's a chance of explosive gases. So it's what's got it's called a Class 1 Division 2 rated environment. And we've got equipment that meets all those standards, and we've gone through all the certification requirements for being a supplier for Dow Chemicals. Over one step on the right, we do a lot of work with airports, and particularly with fuel systems at airports. So in that environment, we have to be kind of in the explosion-proof business again. We also have to make sure that we don't create any radio energy in the frequencies that we use for radar, things like that. We do quite a bit of work in various places for perimeter security cameras. So you might have a, you know, equipment lot, or you might have a mine site or a shipping terminal, or any number of these things where you need to have video cameras, or you'd like to have video cameras, and it's just really not practical to bury cable, or the cable distances are further than what you normally get out of regular Ethernet cable if you trench it. Going down to the drilling rigs, the three drilling rig pictures are kind of in the middle horizontally, and then one at the lower right. We have equipment on, in the good years, probably 25 to 30% of the drilling rigs in North America. So if you pick up a phone and you're dialing out to the rest of the world, the carrier that brings that call from the remote site would be our customer, and the local communications is typically rented either from us through the reseller, or else just directly from the reseller if they buy the equipment from us. Lastly, second from the right on the bottom, that's Sakomi Lake here in Calgary. So if you're out for a swim and they tell you that it's quitting time and you got to leave, or there's a storm coming, or there's going to be swimming lessons, that's all being done over our equipment. So we provide a wireless meshing loop around Sakomi Lake. We do quite a bit of work in the public safety sector for those kind of environments. Just where you know, you have a beach environment, there's a lot of water, it's kind of impossible to trench cable because it'll either get wet or disturbed quite often. That type of environment we work with as well. And occasionally we do something fun like a golf course. So there's a few sites where we put communications links out to the system that does, you know, kind of an IoT control the sprinkler system kind of system, or there's situations where we'll take and extend Ethernet out so they can just provide Wi-Fi in the areas where they do sort of their 19th hole type of activity, as well as connect phones to the maintenance facility and so on and so forth. So just to give you some ideas, some of our customers, Dow Chemicals, the US Coast Guard is one of our clients. There's companies that are what are called non-dominant carriers represented here. Blackhawk, Datacom, RigNet, and Infrastructure Networks are all in the business of providing access to the internet. In the case of RigNet, it's satellite-based predominantly, and they operate in about 17 different countries. Infrastructure Networks and Blackhawk Datacom are what are called non-dominant LTE providers. So they have LTE networks that they're building out in the United States, more specifically to service oil and gas customers and industrial clients. So you wouldn't typically buy a phone off them, but they will give you a radio that gets you high-speed internet access just about anywhere that they have a footprint. And then we also do quite a bit of work in the rental industry with companies like Tanmar, Stellar, and Peak. And Fuelmaster is our fuel systems manufacturer that's based in Tallahassee, Florida, that puts a lot of our stuff out at airports and other fuel sites. So if you have some questions on what we do, I mean, I'm certainly, we can talk later. I'd like to jump into our experience with exporting because, well, let me say that, let me start off with a story. So we've been active in the US market since about 2004. So we have a good sales guy down there, and once in a while we'll go on a road trip. And on the first particular road trip that I remember seeing one of these speed limit signs was in Texas going into Corpus Christi. And that's miles an hour for those of you that haven't traveled down there or rented a car. We spend a lot of time on the road, and the thing that was particularly interesting about this highway is that for 45 minutes straight, going into Corpus at 80 miles an hour, I looked at both sides of the highway and all I could see was refinery plumbing. So after seeing that, when I hear of, various people stating an opinion saying that, what we really need to do is we need to do our own refining in Canada or something like that, it's kind of a bit of a giggle for me, because the reality is that the size of the market in the United States is just so much larger than what we have here. And the other sort of observation that I've come to in the last couple of years especially is that a lot of companies that I have seen fall into what I would call a sales trap. And what this is essentially characterized by is when you have an upstart company, the biggest problem you're trying to solve is whatever it is that you're trying to take to market. So you build a better mousetrap and you find a few customers and you start selling a few mousetraps, and the sales guys start to get happy because they're making money. And then, after about 2 or 3 years, what tends to happen is the sales guys kind of fall into this rut. So what will start to happen in your organization is the sales guys come back into the office and they say, I was talking to Tom over at ABC Company and he really likes our mousetrap, but what he wants is something to trap a badger now. And so then everybody gets around the table and they think, well, the best way to expand our business is to bring new products out. And before you know it, you've got a whole product design process around creating a badger trap. And now you may need to go and try and find new parts and figure out all the product related logistics for this new product. And the reality is that if you just hired a new sales guy in another country and said to him, go find customers that want to buy more mousetraps, it's a very reasonable thing to do. And the most important aspect of that is that you spend your money expanding your business in an area where you already have made the investment in terms of your technology. So the hard part about this is that sales guys, and I'm one, don't like doing this because they would rather continue to phone people that they have spent the last 2.5 years getting close to, that trust them, and it's easier for them to do that. So we're all creatures of habit. So it's almost like you have to walk into the office one day and say, you know what, I'm not going to let the business drive me. I'm going to go and I'm going to drive the business. The other thing is that we tend to narrow our focus based on the environment that we're in. So, everybody's familiar with this quote from Bill Gates, which is, they asked, what keeps you worried about your competitors? And he said a long time ago, I worry about 2 guys in a garage. So the cool stuff is not something that everybody's talking about. The other side of this that has been really quite revolutionary for me is the more distance you travel, the more you're going to see when something is either falling out of favor or it kind of came to the market with a bunch of hoopla, and now people have kind of said, well, you know, there's maybe a better way to do something. So the thing that drives the Canadian industry is to some extent Canadian, but there's also this global market influence. So whether it's, you know, somebody coming in with, you know, some big Chinese manufacturers like, you know, Huawei, or if it's, you know, the Korean guys like Samsung or stuff like that, there's stuff they're doing, and there's stuff that just by being sort of this big elephant, that if they roll over, they're liable to trap you if you don't see it coming. So one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit on LinkedIn is that I don't honestly believe that visionaries are something that it's not a skill you're born with. I believe that visionaries are people that simply have put themselves in the position where they can start seeing the data that leads them to make business decisions that might be revolutionary. And it's a lot harder than most people think. But the more even crackpot ideas that you might find, like one of the best things about the Tech West guys taking us to Barcelona was they would see that there's a whole building at Barcelona at Mobile World Congress that's nothing more than upstart companies. So you can wander around there and you can see what, you know, new stuff people are coming up with, and it gets you thinking, and it gets you at least analyzing ways that you can become better. Now, on the bad side, I mean, we're all kind of in this support group in Alberta here, where we kind of, you know, we're trying to help each other. And the main reason is because, I don't know if you saw the movie Ratatouille, but this is from that. And it's basically rats leaving, and no rats are left in Alberta. But the reality is that we've had some very challenging times here. And, you know, politically, whatever theory you subscribe to, at the end of the day, it still has the same outcome. Now, there's some good stuff that comes along with this, and what it did for us is we kind of came to the conclusion that as much as Alberta is a really good place to do business, and it's a really good place to get top-notch people, and, you know, there's some really sharp folks here and good universities and all that kind of stuff, the benefit to us is the costs are going down for the most part, just because of the way that the economy is. We're under this pressure here, and I think most people in the oil industry realize it, is because for years the oil industry here has been selling their product at a discount. They've in turn pushed that challenge to be more efficient and more technologically advanced to the whole supply chain in the oil industry. So what that has meant is, you know, if you stress something and it survives and it starts to thrive in an environment, eventually it'll be pretty competitive in other environments. So I don't buy for a second that we can't be competitive in other markets. So that, again, to me is indicative by the number of successful Canadian companies that I see whenever I'm driving around Texas. You know, somebody will say, well, you know, you should go see this company, or what about those guys? And I'll go, holy crap, that's a Canadian company. Whether they're a drilling company or, you know, providers of technology or whatever the case might be, there's a lot of threads back here, and we probably swing above our weight in terms of our abilities. Now, the flip side is that I like stories. So my son says to me, you know, there's this Canadian company that makes this dash cam, and can you believe that that dash cam's not rated for -40? And I looked at him and I said, you know, if I was making that dash cam, I'm not sure I would care whether it was -40 either, because there's very few countries in the world where that's an issue. And I can probably sell about a bazillion of them to the countries where they don't care whether it goes to -40. So then the next question becomes, how much do you want to spend and how much are you going to get out of that market? So right now we're going through a design cycle with one of our products where we're way more concerned about the high temperature end of the scale for the oil and gas and the industrial sector that we're trying to service, because there's way more sites, potential sites for that, than there is for ones that will operate at -40. And you know what, maybe -40 is okay if it doesn't cost you a huge amount of money to incrementally to build a product that's certified for that, or maybe you make a variant that is capable of that environment. But that's just one example of business decisions that you can make based on operating strictly in Canada and to some lesser extent just in North America, where you might be limiting yourself in terms of how many more mousetraps you can make. So I've talked about, I'm a native Calgarian. So, you know, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I really believe that we've got some of the sharpest people around. There's some good technology here. There's lots of companies that have been successful living in the stressful environment of the lower margin, lower cost oil and gas business. There's lots of Alberta tech that you can find in other parts of the world. The most important thing from an engineering and manufacturing perspective, as volume goes up, your cost goes down, and volume is free, or at least it's cheap. And it doesn't matter whether you're developing software or whether you're making hardware. If you keep the smokestack going and you're putting out more and more units, that's always a good thing. And we've got a base of localized best of breed talent here that I would compare against any place in the world. Like, we've got sharp folks. If they get together and they produce something, there's no reason why we can't take on the world. So getting back to our particular experience, the gates in doing this, I think, that are really important is you don't want to start experimenting with new products unless a customer is a really close customer and they're, you know, you're very open with them about it. So one of the things that new companies always get caught with is they get caught in this trap of, you know, selling something they don't really have. Luckily, once you get to a mature level in your industry, you can go to a customer and you can say, you know what, here's what you're asking us for, and I think we can build it, but here's the reality around, you know, where we're at, and are you guys prepared to go with us on this journey of going through what I like to call the adolescent phase of the technology. So, you know, there are customers that are prepared to do that. There's customers that aren't. But at the very minimum, if you're going into it open, it's not you still maintain the trust because they know that your stuff's not fully baked. But I don't think that's something you generally want to do until you've got it kind of working in your backyard. So once your customer kind of says to you, and I'll never forget this phone call, like we were struggling for years, and all of a sudden I had this one client and he said to me, we really like your stuff. And for a second, I just about fell off my chair because I kind of thought, what, you know, there's no problem, and so on and so forth. It took us a couple of revisions to get there. But they turned into kind of our first reference account. This is a long time ago. And you know, after that, we started to develop a reputation in the industry and all the other stuff. And those referenceable accounts are the really important thing. So in the oil and gas industry, probably more than anything, you know, I used to jump in the trucks of the service techs and we'd go out in the middle of nowhere. And I learned something really important. And this is another one of my philosophies is you have to turn your organization upside down from a support perspective. You should have your best people out when you're getting going with new markets. Because what I learned was nothing about technology, but everything to do with the habits of these guys. So we're driving back from the middle of nowhere, and this one technician phones up another tech that used to work at the company that I was traveling with, but now works for the competition. And the first thing they start talking about is what gear works and what gear doesn't. So if you want to talk about viral, there's nothing that's going to be more viral than an environment where people are spending hours and hours and hours driving, and the first thing they do is phone their friends when they've got 3 hours to kill. And naturally, they will start talking about what equipment works and what doesn't. So if you're on the wrong side of that, your market will shut down like right away. But especially in a specialty industry, if you're working on, you know, oil and gas drilling, which is this example, you have to, again, make sure your stuff works, and that once you build a reference account, and getting that first reference account in a new market, geographic market particularly, is very important. And the last thing was the encouragement. So there's a whole organization within government that's job is to do international business development. And learning how to use those resources are really important. So if I was to rewind about 3 years, there was a fellow by the name of Victor Lee that worked for the Alberta government as a trade commissioner. And he gives me a call this one day and he says, you know, I've got this trade show that we're trying to get a bunch of Alberta tech companies together for, and it's in Perth, Australia. And, you know, I just need one more company, and, you know, I'm just curious your interest and all that stuff. So I get out on the internet and I look and I find that there's 3 drilling rigs in all of Australia. So I kind of phone him back and ask him if he's crazy. And he sort of says to me, well, you know, why don't you apply for this Alberta export expansion program money? They'll pay for half your trip. Maybe there's some other places you want to hit when you're coming back. And I thought, okay, well, you know, at least he's putting his money where his mouth is. And we did all that and we went along. And so I show up at this trade show in Perth, and I'm not really expecting to find any customers, but instead I'm just talking to people and sort of trying to get grounded about how that market works. And what I find out is the statistics I was looking at didn't reflect the oil rigs that were in some of the surrounding countries like Papua New Guinea, and they were still serviced, and they were still basically all the engineering, all the sort of the industry around it was either out of Perth or Brisbane. And it turned out there was about 150 drilling rigs in that fell into that category. So next thing I notice is their office in one of our customers called RigNet, that we had sold quite a bit of stuff to in the United States over the years, had an office both in Perth and in Brisbane. And I talked to the guys there. And literally within 8 months, we had an order, a pretty substantial size, to support those drilling rigs out of that part of the world. So I guess what I'm saying is there is some element of a fishing trip in all of this. And I mean, you should be smart about it, not just go off to some market because it looks like a good place for a vacation. But we all know kind of where our customers are operating, and you know, things like the Tech West stuff, or you know, any of the trade shows that you can go to for very little money, if you're interested, is always a good investment in time. Now, from a reality check perspective, one of the things that, you know, Clark will talk to you about is having representation in these countries that you might be thinking about going to. Now, if you work for a big company and you signed up a reseller in some new country somewhere, what would happen is the training department would get a hold of them, and they'd make sure that all of the sales guys over there knew exactly how to sell your stuff as well as you do. Now, most smaller companies don't have the luxury of a $10 million training department. And the way that you create competency within either the factory reps or the representatives or the resellers or whatever you use in other parts of the country is you get on a plane and you go over there and you spend a lot of time with them. This was possibly our biggest mistake in the first little while that we were doing this. We would hire factory reps and we would give them a little bit of webinar stuff, and we'd stay at home and we'd hope that they could just go out and figure out how it was that they were going to sell our stuff. And I wouldn't say it was disastrous, but it wasn't particularly successful. And the more that I go and travel around, especially with the trade missions and so forth that we participated with, when you travel with other Canadian companies, you start to realize that the successful ones spend a lot of time on the road. And there's just no way that I know of to get around that. Especially in the early days when you're starting to develop a market, pick your markets based on whatever criteria you want from a marketing perspective, invest the time, invest the money, do some FaceTime, because especially in some of these markets, particularly Southeast Asia, FaceTime and relationship is key to getting going. And there's an opposite side to this, and that is that the Global Petroleum Show has a number of trade commissioners and an international program that I won't say I say it's hidden in my presentations, maybe not fair, but that's the only reason I go to GPS now, because I know the companies that are already there, if they're Canadian companies, but if you can go to the breakout sessions that are in the meeting rooms that are at GPS, that's when you'll get introduced to companies that have been brought over here with the Trade Commissioner Service to basically take a tour of some of the Canadian companies, either through GPS that are on the trade show floor or some of the presentations. And the other thing is that some of the things that Canadian companies are asking for, that your customers are asking for here, can actually take you off track. And I've talked about the -40 issue. From a high level strategy perspective, at least for us, in hindsight, Southeast Asia was actually a lot better to start with and would have been kind of our, you know, I would say the United States would be your first choice, obviously, because it's same language, more or less, and similar laws and all those kind of things. But a lot of people in this part of the world sort of look at Southeast Asia as being a completely different kettle of fish. And it is from a legal perspective and maybe from a regulatory perspective. But the one thing that you can't discount about that part of the world is they're very good with their English language in the business circles. So I was at a meeting in Jakarta with a bunch of IT guys that we did the entire meeting in English. And, you know, it was funny because at the end, for some reason, it was just one of those sort of moments, like an epiphany. It was like, holy crap, we just went through this whole meeting and these guys understand all of the technical aspects of what we've talked about. They're fully engaged in terms of what we're trying to do. They ask the right questions. They just get it. And it's not as easy to have that kind of a meeting in South America or Mexico or Spanish-speaking countries because they may have, you know, they're very polite and they'll, you know, nod and look like they asked some questions. And then you'll leave and you'll realize that they really didn't understand a lot of the stuff that you talked about. So getting going in Southeast Asia does not, it requires local feet in the street. I'm a big believer in you've got to have local factory reps, local talent that understands the culture and how to talk to people and all that kind of stuff. But when I go over there and I start training people, it's a lot easier for me to get going in Southeast Asia. Whereas in South America, now you go to a meeting, you've got the guy there that's your rep, he speaks Spanish. You've got this nasty choice of either you speak in English so that he learns how to do your presentation, or he speaks in Spanish and makes quite a bit of stuff up and you don't know what he's saying and so on and so forth. The other thing that we've learned is culture in the various countries will sometimes dictate the effectiveness of our Trade Commissioner Service. And what I mean by that is in the US, people aren't that interested in talking to a government guy. It's just part of kind of the way they do things. Whereas if you're in Thailand, I mean, we've had interactions with the Trade Commissioner Service where we've said, hey, do you guys know anything about this particular company? Because we did some research and we found out that they might be a good fit for us as a reseller. And the answer comes back, we don't know anything about that company, but I'll contact them for you and I'll set up a meeting. And I'm sitting back looking, going, wow, that was just the equivalent of getting a free guy to go and give a cold call. And not only does he set the meeting up, but he's there to make sure that we don't do something bad in terms of the culture and the conversation, and even do some translation. So those are kind of opposite poles. I mean, there's places where the TCS works just from a whole bunch of reasons, and there's other places where they may not. And you know, anybody that wants to just ask about something like that, I mean, that's something Clark can certainly help with because he's got some background in that area. But culturally, there is some difference. The Trade Commissioner services in general, I think, are absolutely wonderful. We've got at this stage 110 different contacts within the Trade Commissioner service in our database. And some of them we talk to almost constantly. Some of them we talk to every once in a while. There's different ways that they engage markets from a standpoint of some are residents of that country and they're working for the Canadian government. There's some that are dropped in, so they're Canadian expats. But I can honestly tell you that we would not have the success that we've got in some of these countries without the help of the Trade Commissioner Service. And they're there for you to use. They're a free service. A lot of countries charge for their trade commissioners. So if you're an Australian company, you have to pay for that kind of consulting. Whereas in Canada, all you literally have to do is get in touch with them and ask for some help. It's very worthwhile to learn how to use them. If you want to get started with exporting, one of the key things that I like to rant on about is that when you're in a new geographic market, you don't have a reputation yet, good or bad. So the most important thing to do is to get some proof of concept stuff going, get some customers using your stuff, whatever you call it, demo, proof of concept, and hopefully that leads to a reference account, because then your sales guy down there can phone up customers and say, well, why don't you talk to John at XYZ company because he's using our stuff and he likes it. Now, getting through that early adoption phase is something that EDC can help out with in a huge way, because when I talk to a new customer in another part of the world and he asks a bunch of questions and we say, well, you know, we can give you some demo equipment, and assuming that you like it, you can buy it, their eyes just light up because they're used to hearing from companies, well, send us, you know, $20,000 and we'll send you some stuff. And, you know, if you don't like it, maybe we'll give you your money back. This takes the risk away. And that's one of the things that EDC does, as well as underwrite receivables. For a small amount of money, if you have credit terms with companies in the United States, having them in your corner if things go south is really, really good. Because if you phone a customer up and you say, you know what, you owe me X number of thousands of dollars, and if you don't pay, I'm going to have the government of Canada come pay you a visit, that usually gives them a lot more incentive to fix things up with you. There's the Alberta Trade Commissioner Service. So there's people like Victor Lee and Darcy and all the people there that have offices in Canada, and there's also I think about 15 different international offices. And the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service also has offices in probably, I think it's like 140 countries in the world. So from a sort of alignment perspective, each one of the trade commissioners usually specializes in a particular industry. So you might have someone that's a specialist in oil and gas. You might have another person that's sort of the specialist in tech. And it's important for you to know these people and at least get in their mailing list in terms of what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish over there. There's even some newer programs that have to do with joint ventures between companies of different countries. There's some wonderful stuff. There's the Alberta Export Expansion Program, which is probably some of the easiest travel money you can get for attending trade shows, industry events. And, you know, it's kind of a half an hour. And if you have a marketing plan and you can kind of figure out what your expenses are going to be, it's a very rapid way and high value way of paying for, you know, trips to Barcelona if you want to go to Mobile World Congress or those kind of things. There's also the Can Export Program, which is done through the Trade Commissioner Service. And again, it's funding for business development and to expand your markets in new parts of the world. You have to decide what geography you want to be in and kind of put together a budget and submit it. And it's usually for a year or 2 years. And it's a cost sharing type of program. But it's we've also found that to be very invaluable. Some golden rules in the new markets: local reps are critical, but absolutely do not hire them and leave them to their own devices, because until you go, and my rule is to spend about 2 weeks with them. It doesn't necessarily have to happen all at once. But for at least every 3 or 4 months, you should go and spend 2 weeks initially, at least another week after that, get in front of customers, get them familiar with how your story is. They should be able to do your presentation as well as you can, especially in new accounts. And until you invest that time and energy, you're not going to get where you need to go. The local language is very important, particularly in Spanish cultures. So when this gringo goes down to Mexico City, again, everybody's very, very polite, and we have made some impact in English, but having somebody that speaks Spanish is huge. And even speaking styles in the United States are somewhat different. Like, we'll travel together, Mike, our sales guy down there, and myself, and we'll leave a meeting sometimes, and I'll look at them and say, well, obviously I don't speak American, because people have backgrounds, and whether it's, a component of military service or just, whatever, their interests, like football instead of hockey, there's subtle differences in between people, even though the language is the same. Your product must work. There's to go and experiment on new geographic customers is kind of a dead stop for me, because your support costs go through the roof, and and basically you burn your bridges. And wherever possible, you've got to fast track your proof of concepts, your demos, establish your references quickly, realize that you're an unknown entity in that new market. You might be, successful in Western Canada. Everybody knows who you are, and then you show up and they have no idea what your company name is, or, where you came from. And there's lots of tools to assist companies when they're doing this. The TCS, Trade Commissioner Service, and EDC all have things that they can do to help. So with that, I'd just like to sort of close by saying that the world is a big place, and as Canadians, we probably overemphasize how important our own market is in the big scheme of things. And we definitely don't get a lot of information about what's going on out there. And the only way to bridge that gap is to get out there and do it. Like, one of the things that is kind of a rant for me is, when was the last time you heard anything about South America on the news? There's something like 460 million people down there. They have money too, some more than others. But we don't hear a lot about stuff. And that's another reason to get out there and start talking to the Trade Commissioner Service and just see what's going on. Because literally, the US is 300 and some million. Indonesia is 200 and some. We're in a very small country, and the stuff we've got is good. So why not go and sell it to a whole bunch of other people? And with that, I'll hand it over to Brenda.
Thank you very much. Eric, you got to tell us the story of the hat, though, because—
Oh, sure. So I picked this up in Vietnam, and it was $3. I've always wanted one. And the funny part of it was I was going on to some other countries afterwards, because once you're over there, it's pretty easy to hit about 5 countries. And so I took it to the post office and mailed it. So a $3 hat was about $35 to send it back home.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That was an excellent presentation. And I was going to say, I appreciate the fact that we have Darcy and Stefan and Crystal on the line with us. So certainly if anyone wants to reach out, there's going to be obviously Eric and Warren and Clark and myself. We can all do introductions. There's some amazing talent on the line to help us out. So I will switch over now and introduce you to Warren. Warren is from Rainmakers GBD, and they are going to talk about the opportunity in the new market. So Warren, do you want to jump on?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Brenda. And first off, I want to thank you for setting this up for us. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to engage some of your membership, and we're excited to be members as well. So thanks a lot for putting this event on. And obviously, you're a very great person to have in the Alberta community for, as a business leader. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to potentially help some of your members. So thanks for that. And thanks, Eric, for sharing your successes and challenges, and appreciate you bringing us in on this call with you. So thanks for that. And I'm sure most of you are looking forward to the day that we can do these meetings in person, but for the time being, I mean, this will have to do. And certainly I'm grateful to be able to present in any way, shape, or form and see if we can help some of you guys out. So, and obviously this is a time of great challenge, great change, and, but I really believe that the IoT space is in a position to really help kind of lift our economy up. And I'm sure a lot of you hold the same sentiment, to be able to kind of kickstart things and really help our economy get back on track and grow. So excited to be a part of that as well. I know I've met some of you in passing at past events, and just through networking and being a local Calgarian born and raised, but I've spent about the past 10 years of my career predominantly in digital marketing. Kind of in the last 2 or 3 years transitioned into startups and technology world, where learned a lot about sort of the ecosystem of emerging technologies. And then in the last year or two have really kind of emphasized a lot on where industrial technology is really taking the reins from consumer technology, and where there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. And for us as a community and as a city and a province, I really believe that there's a huge opportunity to do a lot of good and grow our economy. So again, I'm super excited to be able to be engaged with this community, and that Brenda was able to bring us in on this call today. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Clark Grue, who is our founder and CEO at Rainmaker. And Clark is someone who is, I'm sure some of you know from the Calgary business community, but he's a respected leader in the Calgary business community and a truly visionary global leader who has advised hundreds of companies on the nuances and strategies of business expansion and diversification. Clark is currently the chair of Meetings Mean Business in Canada. In the past, he served as the CEO of the Calgary TELUS Convention Center, the vice chair of the American Chamber of Commerce, and led Canadian delegations to B20 summits in 2015 and 17. So I think without further ado, I'll pass it over to Clark, and he can present more about our offerings and the Can Export program, and how it can potentially help some of the members here today. Clark?
Thanks, Warren, and thank you all for giving us a chance just to chat here today for a few minutes. And Brenda, thank you so much for inviting us into this group and to have a conversation. Eric, thanks so much. It was great to hear your stories. I've listened to so many company stories over the years, and it's always interesting and fun to hear how people do this, go international, expand their businesses. And so it's great to hear from you. So thank you. Brenda, do I have to ask for permission to share my screen, or am I gonna be able to just do that here? Do you know?
Eric, I need you to switch over and give host to Clark, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I think we're doing that now. Okay, I'm waiting for that. So everybody, I won't take a lot more time. I will keep this pretty concise. Share with you a bit on what we've been learning about how we can help Alberta companies expand. To be honest, a lot of what Rainmaker has been doing for years. Okay, I'm still not able to share. So just in case we need to get that sorted.
Sorry, Brenda, just to jump in, how do I do that exactly?
You go under participants.
Okay.
And you share, make host over, because right now you've got all the controls.
Okay. Stop video, make host, there you go.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, so does that mean that I've got the control now, or?
You have control.
Okay.
Resistance is futile.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for giving up control. I appreciate it. So everyone, I'm gonna share my screen with you so you can see this. I hope you're seeing this now. Are you seeing my opening slide?
We are. And now you can go into view options and turn around and make it. There you go.
Good.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. And we'll jump in now. And like I said, I don't want to take too much of your precious time, but I want to run you through some about Rainmaker and what we've been doing for a number of years. Started in 2007, an Alberta company. And we basically were working with a number of inbound companies for many, many years. So working on strategies for companies to come into Canada and into Alberta. And really, that was our bread and butter for the first 10 years of Rainmaker. And then a couple of years ago, obviously, changes in the market had us pivot, as we're going to talk about perhaps for your companies today, pivot to looking at our model differently and applying it differently. Or to different markets. So what we've done is shift our focus, if you will, from helping foreign companies coming into Canada to helping Canadian companies going into markets around the world. So I'm going to touch on some of that today. So here's my promise for today's presentation. Three quick things. Going to provide you with a unique way to consider your company's maturity within specific markets. Present a process that will help you work through stages of expanding into a new market, and demonstrate how Rainmaker can support your successful market entry by leveraging Canadian and Alberta government programs. So, and you've heard a bit about that already, so not too much new there to unpack, but maybe how we activate them. So,
Clark, sorry,
yes.
I just want to jump in really quickly. If you go to the top of your screen, you see display settings. If you click on that, you can actually open it up and just have go to swap presenter view, and that way you don't have all of your notes up on the screen. There you go.
Okay,
there,
cool.
Awesome.
Oh,
there.
so you guys can't read ahead now. That's good.
There you go.
I like that. Thanks, Brenda. That's perfect. So this is what I'm going to promise to give you in the next 10 to 11 and a half minutes. So when we talk to companies about this, obviously, when you're considering an expansion into a new market, our suggestion would be to start with why, and start with why you're doing it. Could be that your company is very unique and you feel it is a step ahead in some unique way. Markets obviously are changing. Alberta market has shifted. I think we all have felt that to some extent in our worlds. Either it might be diversification or sustainability. COVID-19, of course, is making us all think about this. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, if you're considering this expansions, because it's all complicated. And I love this slide. I'm sure you've all seen it, but when you really think about the world and you think about the US marketplace, and we talk a lot about the US market because, to be honest, it is the most reachable market, the easiest market, and quite frankly, coming out of COVID, everything I'm hearing will be the market that comes back first. Capital flows have all come back to the US, so capital that was going internationally has now come back to the US market. Many of the futurists are predicting that the US will pick up first and they will invest first in the US market. Food for thought, if nothing else. So to talk a little bit about Rainmaker and who we are, again, started in 2007. Myself and two business partners, Tim Cosmic, who's an oil and gas expert who has been in this space for 30 years, and Lois Mitchell formed the company. Lois is now our Lieutenant Governor, in case you don't know who she is. At least she is for the next few months before she returns to us and finishes her role there. And we started the firm basically, as I said, working with a number of companies from around the world coming into Canada. That's shifted. Through that, we've developed our process for helping companies to do this effectively, which involves defining the unique value proposition. One of the biggest mistakes companies make going into new markets, that anybody in the new market will care what you do. Market feasibility studies, so to dig deep into the market fundamentals that allow you to penetrate the market or to avoid the market. Strategic market plans and implementation, so working with companies to actually enter the market and be successful. And then in-market global business development audits, so we can look at markets you're in to make sure you're optimizing them. These are a legacy of some of the companies we've worked with in the past. We've been very privileged to work with some great firms over the years. You know, I can't, like every Alberta company, you look back, and I'm sure for you too, Eric, I think you said you guys are 17 years old at least. You look back and you go, you can't imagine how fast it goes. And it's been 13 years for Rainmaker. So I want to move into just my 3 points now, and how to assess your market maturity. When you're looking at a market, we use a step continuum process to help us when we're talking to a company about what they're looking to do globally. You know, there's usually that first step. Is somebody trying to ask a question, or is it they just not muted? No, okay. So the first is you don't know the market, you don't know anything about it, and you're very new to the market. Other one is you know enough to make you dangerous. You know some things about the market. Maybe you've visited the market. We talked about trade missions and ways to get there, so you feel like you have a bit of a sense of it. Then you get to that stage where you have that first customer in the market, and this is where you're starting to make some headway. Maybe the customer came in, you know, over the internet, and you just happen to be in that new market, or maybe you've actually made a concerted effort, or you have a sales rep in market, as Eric said, that's gotten you a first customer. Eventually, you get to some form of presence in market. Now, Eric talked a lot about having a representative in market. Presence in market can look like many things. It can be a technology partnership. It can be an acquisition, greenfield, brownfield, joint venture, you know, marketing partnership, sales office, many different ways to enter a market. And we would argue that the right way to do that needs to be strategic. Operations in the market. So now you're in the market, and you're actually working through, you know, maximizing that market and getting the most out of it. Then you move into the profitability. And this is really the target that Rainmaker focuses on with our clients, is to get them to a point where they're profitable in the market. If that market is not profitable for you, something's wrong. And so we need to think about what we're doing to make sure that we get to this mark. And then, of course, market maturity, where you've taken as much market share as you can, and perhaps market exit. So these are the phases that we take companies through to assess where they are with respect to a specific market. Helps us to assess what needs they have, or what solutions may be available to them from us or from others. So when we look at a new market, we go through two really important elements in our world. One is the company, and one's the market, and how they match up. So when we talk about your company's key components, we talk about your capacity, your capabilities, your leadership is so important, and your commitment to going to a new market. Without all four of these explored, we believe a lot of companies make mistakes on where they enter and how they enter new markets. Then when you look at the market itself, you look at the geopolitical components that can impact your particular market entry. You look at the industry itself, the industry you're selling into, and where it is in its maturity in the market. Access issues, access challenges, whether that's in trade and you're moving product, or whether it's people and you're moving people in and out. Access can be a challenge from many different angles, certifications in this group, etc. And the opportunity itself. You know, how is that market doing? Is it growing? Is it expanding? Is it an opportunity for you? And then when we put these together and it starts to align, that's when we see companies have really great market success. So we'll talk a little bit about CanExport specifically here. There are a number of support programs out there. The Alberta Export Expansion Program, Alberta Innovates with their voucher program, all excellent. And I encourage you to look at them all. We've focused in on CanExport specifically. Now, I know Dave Downey's on the line. He's an Alberta IoT member. He's with ARCO Information. And Dave, I have to give Dave a lot of props here. So he sits on and chairs actually the SME committee for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And he was in a lot of the consultations in the last 3 years on CanExport and how to improve it. So I do want to give props on this program to the federal government. They've really listened to business. They've listened to SMEs on how to improve the program, and they've done a great job with it. So I encourage you to look at it. And what I'm going to unpack here is is how Rainmaker is activating the program for our clients. As I said, we're a strong proponent of government, both government programs, but also intelligence. And Eric talked about this. There's a tremendous amount of intelligence and connections available through our government partners, whether they are here and working with companies in Alberta or they're abroad. Really great sources of information and intelligence on markets. So when we looked at the Can Export program, here's some of the components of it that you want to think about as a company. Some of the criteria: company must be registered Canadian company. You got to have a CRA number for last year, and your last year's revenue need to be somewhere between $100,000 and $100 million. That bucket includes a lot of SMEs. It's pretty broad. And then when you're looking at a specific market, you need to not be getting more than 10% of your sales from that market already. It has to be a relatively new market to you to qualify for using Can Export from what we've understood from the program. I know there's people on the call who may know this program even better than I do, so I'll leave that to you. Casey McMechan is on the call from Rainmaker as well, and Casey is our in-house Can Export expert, and he's working a number of companies through this program as we speak, and he's on with me to take any questions you might have on this. But based on this program, what we found interesting is that there's a larger bucket of money available to engage consultants, and this is where we've found a way to bring our program together with Can Export and have our fees covered as much as 75%. So that's a real win for the companies that we're working with. And so how do we use this? We believe, and we've developing our market entry strategies for the past 13 years. And before that, I've been in this space about 22 years. Opened and started the British government office here in Alberta. So I helped British companies coming into the market. And in my career, we've basically honed in on a process that allows us to evaluate the market effectively, build an entry plan that is specific to the company that fits the market, and then help the company actually implement that process. What I often find is I'm often speaking to CEOs or the C-suite of a company or the ownership group, and they know that this is going to take their time if they're actually going to expand into a new market. And quite frankly, most of them don't have a lot of extra time kicking around. So to have a program come in that can help them accelerate this and involve them as they need to be has been very well received in this market. So our feasibility study looks at, as you can imagine, the size of the market, level of competition, incentives available in the market, challenges and opportunities that will face the company in the market, and of course comes up with a market entry recommendation. It could be get a salesperson here. It could be broader. It could be look at an acquisition or a joint venture technology partnership. Our process in this is, as you can imagine, secondary market research and primary market research. So we're looking at a number of factors that can impact the market opportunity for a company. And on the primary research side, we're actually talking to a number of the folks in the market who understand the market very, very well. Obviously, if we have a trade commissioner there or an Alberta government office there, they're one of our best resources. But there's other ways to get information on the market as well. The local Chamber of Commerce, the industry associations, local economic development groups who are dying to get your company to come there. All those sorts of different market intelligence sources is where we look at all these. And it could be regulators depending on the company or other components. Then when we get to the market entry stage, we come up with one or two targeted jurisdictions that we want to enter. And we start to work with the company to fine tune their value proposition for the market, implement the market entry with the client, do executive interviews with potential clients and partners, project owners, depending on what the product is and who we're targeting. Could be distributors or whatever that looks like. And look to identify the first opportunities for the client and help them actually get engaged, push them into the market, help them into the market, and support them in the market. And this is, you know, there's a lot of tactics to this we work with the client to define, but they can involve any of the things here on the screen as well. So when we talk to a company, we start with, where are you on the continuum? If we need to go feasibility study or market entry development or business development audit, if they're already there. And then we start to work with them as to how we can help the company. And of course, we look at how Can Export can help us help the company. So as Can Export comes into play, the green boxes here are where Can Export is helping us to move companies, help them succeed in the market. And then of course, once they're there and operating, Can Export is no longer the source, but there are other programs, other grants, other supports in place to help as well. We mentioned, Eric mentioned EDC, and you know, they have pull contracts that can help from the market side. There's there's incentives and other things we can look at, but basically the idea is to get them to a point of profitability and maturing the market. And so I'm just about done, I promise. And so basically we have a number of steps to move through this with us. I'm putting them in here just in case, just so this deck can be provided later and you can look at them in case you're wondering, because this is often the question. So you get to this point, I get to this point in the presentation, it's like, okay, so what? So what's next? Here they are, sort of the next pieces that we talk about with customers and get them engaged with us. So that pretty much wraps me up here. I hope that was useful. I hope it was informational for you. You've got on this slide, and you'll be getting this, I'm sure, through Brenda. You have our contact details of who's on the call today. And that's pretty much it. So Brenda, I guess I'll throw back to you. And if there's questions for Eric or questions for us, we'd love to answer them.
Awesome. So let's jump off this stop sharing and let's turn around and open it up and see if anyone has any questions for either Eric is still on the line and Clark is on the line. So yeah, any conversation or any questions? Okay, so I will say while I'm waiting, because I know it takes a moment to type up questions too, and that's always the challenge of the day. We will be sending this deck out this afternoon with the recording. So if you have questions, all of the contact information will be on there. So if you want to reach out to any of these individuals, obviously, please go ahead. We've had a number of people from government on the call too. We can do introductions for you as well for that. Coming up again, when you get the note out this afternoon, we will have the MMP 2-hour complimentary innovation workshop on there. We'll have the Telesparks survey on there. And the last thing too, because we have the golf tournament coming out next week, we have a number of events coming up with the agriculture. We're looking for more volunteers. We have, I think, a team of 20 now that is working with us for Beakerhead and the golf tournament. But we'd love to have people who would like to facilitate polls when we're doing these events or helping us move into breakout rooms. So if you're technology savvy, love Zoom, and can understand how to do all of these things, please reach out to me directly and we will set you up part of our volunteer committee. And I will say there's great conversation that's happening within that committee. Some of them are going golfing this afternoon to check out the new golf course. There's a lot of, they're starting to work with everybody, so that's really excellent. Okay, one more minute. Anyone have any questions or not? Oh, okay, I would be a Zoom pro. Hey, Kristen, let's talk. Otherwise, I will wish you all a wonderful day. It's gorgeous out. Like I said, the emails will be coming this afternoon. Thank you to our presenters, Eric and Clark, Warren. We really appreciate what you shared today. I think it was very relevant, and I know everybody on the line appreciated it. So thank you. Everyone have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye now.